All right, the bye week is upon us. And before Dani Sureck and Darren Urban say bye for the week, we're going to bust out this edition of Cardinals Underground brought to you by Pacific Office Automation. I think the question off the top that is most relevant as Paulie Podcast thinks out loud, do we need to revisit or review the expectations and standards during the bye week?
Of the podcast?
No, just for conduct thereof. Once you're away from the facility and you're enjoying said bye week.
You want to self-scout Cardinals Underground?
As Bruce Arians used to say, don't be the guy, including me. BA used to include himself in the rules and regulations
Probably
and the
good
expectations.
idea.
So,
Probably a good idea.
Are we good, Dani? Are you good? Are you you're good on what's expected by the time you get back next Monday?
There are no expectations, Paul. So, yeah, I'm pretty good. I'd say I'm pretty good on the expectations.
All right. Okay. She's a little incredulous that, I'm throwing out there that, there would ever be any question about anyone's conduct during the bye week. I mean, my goodness, especially after a feel-good win like that in Pittsburgh. I'm a little confused, though. I thought it was the Steelers who win at home in December under Mike Tomlin because the record was 29-11. And the Cardinals went in there and they beat the Steelers at their own game. Did they not?
I'm just glad that you're here on this Tuesday, finally dried off after being down on the field through those 2 weather delays, Paul.
It was a process. I tried to get the officiating crew. I tried to convince them that we were past the 5th inning and the Cardinals had the lead. Just call the game and everyone can get back on Redbird 1.
I asked that same question in the press box.
Didn't work. But yeah, I've never been through something like that. And it was the Lightning, obviously, because they'll play through anything, and they have. We've all seen it.
That's why you got to call it a weather delay, not a rain delay, because it wasn't a rain delay.
It was early second quarter, and I looked across the sideline, and the Steelers crew started putting tarps over everything. Oh, that's not a good sign. Then I looked to my left, and the Cardinals equipment guys were putting tarps over everything. I said, they know something I don't, and about 5 minutes later, deluge. Oh, and it was just coming down sideways. And that's what was most remarkable to me about that 99-yard drive, was that the Cardinals did it in that driving rain. And there was a wind in the face of Kyler Murray, and they still converted 5 third downs. It was a flawless drive in so many ways, but they did it in the elements. And, I mean, how many times do you hear on the road, the Cardinals aren't going to be able to handle the weather? So I know it gets thrown around a lot, culture, but just the mental toughness in this case to handle all the above when there were so many excuses to not win that game. And once again, they played Steelers football better than the Steelers when they leave TJ Watt after the game saying, we got our behinds kicked.
To spend almost 90 minutes in a locker room in delay time and to come out and respond both times the way the Cardinals did is impressive. We heard from some of the players, there was a little bit of freestyling, a little bit of dancing, and just kind of stay loose. But the fact that they were able to still be so focused and lasered in to come out and perform the way they did after both of those delays says a lot about the mindset and mental strength as well as the leadership in that locker room.
What really struck me was when that game started, obviously the offense was not good. And Kyler Murray said afterwards, I was probably a little sped up. I wasn't feeling real comfortable. It took me a while to settle in. And you could tell he looked, whether it looked nervous or just anxious, he was playing like that. And that wasn't everything. Obviously, they couldn't run the ball either. But a defense that got absolutely run over the week before by the Rams to play the way it did against a team that wanted to run them over and hold up well enough. Obviously, the Steelers had a nice opening drive, got a field goal, but that was really all they got scoring-wise, and every time they had to have a play, the Cardinals' defense had a play. And they made that work up until the point where Kyler Murray and the offense started doing some stuff. I thought that was so impressive. James Conner was unbelievable. Trey McBride was unbelievable. I thought Kyler Murray played a game that was way beyond what his stats would show. But I thought it was the defense that did something. I don't care if it was Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky. They had played so poorly the week before, and the way they played Sunday was really impressive.
Because let's face it, after the Rams loss at home, the way they lost that game, the way they gave up 228 yards rushing, nearly 7 yards a carry, as lackluster an effort as that looked like at times, it was legitimate to be worried, to wonder, How are the last 5 games going to go? You're out of playoff contention. What is this going to look like? And my understanding is they saw a side of Jonathan Gannon after that Rams loss they had yet to see. And the message was sent, look, we might lose, but we're not losing like that. We're not losing with that lack of effort. So if nothing else, that's what you saw. To me, I mean, just that whole energy, enthusiasm thing that Gannon talked about, that was there. Now, was the execution there early? No. Maybe a lot of guys were just over anxious. I don't know. There were a lot of whiff blocks on the edges of the offensive line. They were missing guys. But by the time they got to the fourth quarter and that last touchdown run by James Conner, 3rd and goal from the 9, he didn't even get touched till inside the 5. The offensive line surge, I mean, they wore down the Steelers, which is what everyone expected the Steelers to do to the Cardinals.
It was impressive coming off that Rams loss on all 3 phases of the game, really. I mean, special teams didn't have a great game in that Rams game either, and kicker Matt Prater tied his own franchise record for most 50-plus yard field goals in a season with 7. And
Let Prater cook.
I mean, talk about trusting your kicker. What was the number we saw, Darren? 4 straight games where Prater has attempted a 50-plus yard field goal
and
8 games this season, and he's made 7 of those 9.
In the elements, that would have been good from 70. That was an absolute missile.
Crushed it.
Incredible. Special teams had a much better performance. The defense had a much better performance after getting run all over by the Rams. And I like the way the Cardinals stuck with the run game this week. James Conner did not have an easy start. He had a hard time getting downhill, really finding those extra yards that he does such a good job at, and really running through the tackles. Against the Rams, he had 4 carries on that first drive and then only 2 more the rest of the game. He had 25 carries in Pittsburgh, and it was a season-high 38 carries, correct, for the team, Darren?
38 total. You're counting the 3 kneel downs at the end.
Okay, so 35.
Yeah.
But the fact that we had heard earlier in the week from offensive coordinator Drew Petzing that in hindsight probably should have given the ball to Conner more and stuck with the run game a little more, and the fact that that's what the Cardinals did this week, and it ended up, things started rolling in the second quarter and you could see the benefits of sticking with the run game. I like that as well. All 3 phases, a much better performance.
Again, agree with the sticking with the run, but the defense let them stick with a run. I mean, if the Steelers get 10 points on those first 2 drives, then you're starting to get a little skittish about how that might go, especially when you look at James Conner having 17 yards rushing at halftime on 10 carries. The Conner thing was amazing. Obviously, everybody was hoping he could it was going to be a story anyways, just him going back. But for him to finish the way he did with 105 yards after 17 at halftime, 25 carries, as you mentioned, that's only the 3rd time in his career he's had 25 carries. He had one 25-carry game with the Cardinals against the Chargers last year, 120 yards. And then he had a 31-carry game his second year, the first week of the season for the Steelers. Most of the time, he doesn't carry it that much. Most backs never carry it 25 times in a game anymore. And yet, here was a guy that, if you had to draw up that whole cliche of he got better as the game went on, he got stronger as the game went on, that was him. Like, all his best runs were in, like, his last 8 carries when, like you said, they had wore down the Steelers, the offensive line was coming off the ball, and he had something to show everybody.
Seemed like a storybook homecoming.
Yes.
To go back to Pittsburgh, where he played in college, played all of his home games at what is now Acrisure Stadium. Despite, some injuries, a cancer diagnosis, the Steelers took a chance on him, drafted him in 2017, where he started his career, to go back into Pittsburgh, a city that Conner had made it clear earlier in the week still meant a lot to him. And you could feel the love pre-game, I'm sure, Paul, during the game from the fans. It wasn't just fans who had traveled in Conner Cardinals jerseys. There were plenty of Steelers Conner jerseys. And those fans a lot of times were holding a jersey from Pitt for him to sign. I saw a Cardinals fan who had a poster of pictures of her with Conner, and they were all of when Conner was in a Pittsburgh jersey. It was just, it's the type of person he is. You want to cheer for him regardless of which team you are a fan of. So to have the performance he did, a great individual performance, a great team performance, a win in that kind of weather, you want nothing more than that for somebody like Conner.
And he did all the media obligations afterwards, which I give him props for.
Including myself, very grateful for that.
Yep. And I'll be honest with you, all right, full disclosure, I'm walking off the field and Conner was with you doing the TV side. They go, well, you're not getting them for radio. And then when I got into the locker room and I'm firing up the gear and it's down on the floor and I look up and number 6 is standing over me. So it was great. He came, he did the radio, he did network TV, he did the media.
Well, as long as he did all that, so
you know.
that then he had, before he actually met in the regular media in the podium, he had to shower and everything. So I had to sweat it at the end. But I'm glad you guys were good.
But I asked him, I said, look, is this the way you envisioned it? I mean, you know, when you were anticipating this week, I mean, if you had to write it up, and he paused and smiled, and, you know, he says more sometimes with his expressions than he does with his words. But it doesn't get much better than the way it turned out.
When he came into the media room, he gets up there and I asked the first question. I said, when you talked to us last week in the press conference, you said, hey, if 3 years hadn't gone by. And what he had said last week was, if 3 years hadn't gone by, it might be a little bid more of a big deal. But it's been 3 years since I've been a Cardinal, all this stuff. So I say, if 3 years hadn't gone by, and he cut me right off, and he smiled, and he goes, why you got to bring that up? And he goes, finish. And I said, well, obviously this had to mean a lot to you. And then he got that smile, which we all know what that smile is. And he's not with the words. If you see it in print, it may not come across how you know he means it. But if you watch it on video and you watch his body language, you could tell. I mean, if he had to draw it up, that's how he would have wanted to draw it up, to get a win, to perform the way he did. I think that meant so much to him.
And end up on angry runs after he just tossed Patrick Peterson aside.
Just as incredible as Connor's performance was in Pittsburgh was Kyle Brandt's performance on that segment. And look, I was not here, so I can't really delve too much into it. So I did not personally cover Patrick Peterson. I know that he was very vocal, as he has been in the past on social media ahead of playing the Cardinals. So the fact that it was Peterson that JC stuffed and hit to the ground with that one hand, the fact that Kyle Brandt brought out, have you guys watched it yet?
Yes.
He brought out a level just to show the power behind that stiff arm. Incredible.
I love the line, by the way, where he said it's like James Conner is like James Caan beating up Carlo, which is a reference to the original Godfather when James Caan is pounding Carlo on the curb in the street, just pummeling him.
A quick aside on the Patrick Peterson stuff. I know there's a lot of fans with some really strong feelings. Look, Well,
he had some strong comments about Kyler Murray a year ago.
He did. And again, that's where I'm going with it. Like, look, Patrick was always a guy who the words got away from him once in a while. And sometimes I don't even think he realized the words got away from him. And he was one of those guys where if you were there listening, sometimes it sounded a little bit different than if you just saw it in print of what he said.
True.
I will also say that obviously he had some very hard feelings when he left here. He said some fairly harsh things, understandably, about the former GM, and that understood, but the former GM is gone. And
by the way, after the Minnesota win last year, what did he do? He came to the Cardinals sideline and it was caught on camera.
Yeah.
And I was right there, and he was yelling out, "Where's Kime?
Yeah.
Where's Kime?"
And he said some things about the quarterback, which when he was here, my understanding is that those two guys had a pretty good relationship. And it's a little disappointing. Obviously, he said some things going into this game, looking forward to another win. So, yes, while I have sometimes some mixed feelings with Patrick, I completely understand the fan base that relished that video. Even though it didn't count as a play because of a penalty.
Oh, I'm going to say what Kyle Brandt said on Good Morning Football, which, yes, the play was negated, but then so are you, Darren, for bringing that up. I'm just excited because this is the third time that Connor has won the Angry Run scepter, and so when you get the scepter, you do a photo shoot. And our team photographer, Caitlin Epps, did a really, really cool photo shoot last time Connor got it last season. So I'm excited to see. I don't know if that's going to take a little bit of time now that it's the bye week, so everybody's kind of out of the building.
Well, see, here's the problem that I was thinking about that. Like, if James Conner isn't back till next week, I mean, are you going to do one even though they're about to? That's a good point.
Maybe he'll just do a selfie. Run? But in the past, the pictures have been pretty cool.
Trust me, I would love to see that, but I don't know because of the bye week that may jack the whole thing up.
But does it get any better than the post-game picture Caitlin snapped of the head coach with the game ball in his hand?
That was incredible in the locker room.
About to give the game ball to James Conner. We suggested Calvisi consulting the Paulie Pigskin division that the game ball says bully ball because that's his phrase, bully ball. He got that from the Steelers. And I can tell you on that sideline, there were plenty of guys yelling out, "Bully the bully." That was the mindset. And that's what James Conner is. The dude is a mindset. He's a mentality, the way he plays. It's funny because Kyle Vandenbosch said it didn't shock him that a number of guys took some mysterious angles to the football on defense for the Steelers when the game was decided in the fourth quarter. It's funny how that happens.
Well, I as much as I want to give, and James gets all the credit in the world for piling up all those yards late, it was not the same defensive effort that was stopping him early in the game that was looking at him when they were down 21 points and he was coming at him full speed.
But it's amazing how guys aren't as willing to come after a James Conner as maybe a smaller, more diminutive American running back than a guy who played defensive end at Pitt with Aaron Donald before they converted him full-time to running back. So that's how you know you're in the NFL, by the way. When a guy who played defensive end at Pitt is all of a sudden a Pro Bowl running back, you're like, okay, freak show here. So that was good to see. And that picture got a lot of attention, did it not?
Well, it's funny because James Conner and Jonathan Gannon, two people in this building who don't typically like to show a lot of emotion. So the fact that we publicly, yes. So the fact that we saw emotion from Conner post game, those little smiles and chuckles, and to see that fired up JG, and a picture is worth 1,000 words, and you can come up with more than 1,000 words to understand when you see that picture. To understand,
some of them might need to be beeped out.
Yes. Why JG felt that way.
Well, when I ran into the locker room, and I'm the first one in there due to the post-game radio, some smart guy was cranking up Renegade by Styx.
We did hear that through the wall.
Did you?
Yeah,
so that was good.
I did notice that.
That really was the highlight for the Steelers fans. The Yinzers in the stands really was the beginning of the fourth quarter and Renegade over the PA system. Other than that, they didn't have much to cheer about.
That was my first time in Pittsburgh. And so even though the press box glass mutes a lot of that, it was still cool to be able to hear the song, and the fans who had very graciously stayed until that point in the game through 2 weather delays, especially when their team was down as many points as they were. That was just, it's one of those, I felt the same way when I went to Lumen Field for the first time, right? These well-known, long-lasting stadiums that have so much history behind them, it's cool to go and see that as part of our job. And the icing on the cake was that after Renegade played, which is played when the Steelers need a big defensive stop in the fourth quarter, Greg Dortch came in clutch with that impressive catch to convert a 3rd down. So that was a nice little touch.
I told Craig Greeley this, but I'll relay it to you guys. On the sideline, there was that catch by Dortch, and everyone's like, oh, my goodness. Guys on the sideline just reacted. It just couldn't be more impressed. And then he had the punt return where he started one way and then he flipped back the other and he made like 3 guys miss, and it didn't net a whole bunch of yards. Just ridiculous, though, how stupid he made a couple of those punt cover guys look. And Kelvin Beachum was standing next to me and he was giving me a hard time because I was maintaining my notebook through the weather delay. Okay, so it's a little smeared right here. But
wait a minute, is that it?
This is it. It actually survived.
I'm going to say, Paul, I've seen you after some weather games.
Yeah.
And your notebook looks like crap.
Okay, I don't know if we want to get this on camera. Here's the water damage notes.
Okay. Doesn't look as bad as I thought it was.
I tried out a little bit, but Kelvin Beachum was very adamant. Write down Greg Dortch. He's all 83. Write it down. And I'm like, and I laugh and I go, no, write it down. And I'm like, big Kelvin Beach. I'm like, yes, sir, Mr. Beach. Let me 83 Dortch. That's Dortch. Okay. I'm like, but. You know what? And I know Beach probably he got a few meaningless snaps at the end, but he's a former Steeler as well, and so the team knew what it needed to do to beat the Steelers. Now, did we ever expect T.J. Watt after the game to say we got our butts kicked? Mike Tomlin to say we looked like we were playing JV football? No, I didn't see that coming. But for a Cardinals team to rebound like that, I mean, that's the sort of win that you can reference as Jonathan Gannon going forward, right? Where every young guy in this team, all the first and second year players, and there are a ton. Now you went into Pittsburgh in December, and with a banged up roster, you beat a Steelers team that was leading the AFC wildcard, something that rarely ever happens on their home field in December under Mike Tomlin.
As we head into this bye, and there's 4 games remaining, what was it feels like one of the big narratives or one of the big hopes or whatever you want to call it going into the season was if this team can find itself as, in a lot of ways, the Lions in Dan Campbell's first year, where they didn't win a lot of games, but you could see something. And whether you want to compare it to the Lions or not, that's up to you. But you can see something. This does not look like a 3-win team. Now, they've had the main quarterback back for these last 4 games, and that's where they got to 2 wins. And at 2-2, if Kyler Murray had been healthy the whole time with this roster, that's where I kind of would have picked them, somewhere around 7 to 10 wins, somewhere in there. And that's kind of what they're doing right now. But the fact that they're able to maintain enough focus to not let this get sideways late in the season with the record the way it is, I just think is a big testament to what Jonathan Gannon is doing right now.
That was something I'd asked Connor in my post-game interview, is the mindset and the resiliency of this team to bounce back coming off a lackluster performance against the Rams the week prior. And Connor said, our record does not resemble and doesn't show the fight that we have. And that's a great way to put it. You're right, Darren. This does not look like a 3-win team. They have been putting together a lot of good pieces, not always in the same game on all the 3 phases of the game, but coming off a week like this week against the Steelers, when all 3 phases looked like they were clicking and we saw complementary football for the first time, where the offense was putting points on the board after the defense had forced turnovers, you're getting a sense of what this team can really be. That's still dealing with injuries. You didn't have wide receivers Michael Wilson. Hollywood Brown left the game with a heel injury that had plagued him all week, kept him out of practice all week. I think this is a good preview, though, of the core players on offense and defense when you got Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson back in that safety room after they were hurt. With the core players, you're getting a good preview of what this team can really look like when you have a little bit more time under Gannon and his coordinators and this coaching staff. And you can add a few more personnel pieces where you have some holes and you're having to really dig deep in the depth of position rooms that don't have a lot of experience. While you might be getting enough, you can absolutely get more. But you are getting a good idea of what this team can really look like this season.
Paul, you and I have watched this team for many, many years. A game where the quarterback, and it wasn't a lot of completion, it was 13 completions, but the game where the quarterback had 13 completions and 11 went to tight ends.
Yeah. You know what I thought of, honestly? I thought of Carson Palmer in the way he won some games.
Yeah.
Because the passing stats to Carson didn't matter. But to me, that's why it was such a big step for Kyler. Not only what happened over the course of the game, we'll get into that specifically, but the fact it's how you won the game, where you had the rushing stats, right? Almost 4 yards a carry, 150 yards rushing. You outrushed the Steelers. 3rd down, 10 of 17. After you started 0 for 4. I mean, you could have gone in the tank as an offense. You didn't. You ripped off 8 out of 9 at one point, 5 on the 99-yard drive, 3 for 3 in the red zone. No turnovers against a top 5 takeaway defense. Pittsburgh, they were number 1 with the Niners in turnover ratio. So all those key winning stats, you didn't light up the passing game. And to your point, Dani, it's a good point. No Michael Wilson, no Zach Pascal. You still ran the ball without your 2 best run-blocking receivers, who were very vital first couple months of this season in the run game. They're no longer at your disposal. It was just the manner in which they went out there. And to me, that was the winning football that Gannon talks about. That's what they're looking for. And then I think it was the answer to the question that we all posed after the Rams lost. Well, what would have happened if you used the same game plan, the same play calling, the rest of the game as you used on that first drive when you went 12 plays, 75 yards, under center 5 times, 4 carries to James Conner? Well, guess what? This is what happens. He carries it 25 times. He goes over 100 yards. Kyler's under center 24 times, more than the first 3 games combined. That's what it looks like if you continue with the same plan of attack, use that opening drive against the Rams at home.
I will say there's a caveat to that, and it goes back to what I was talking about originally, which is the defense has to ball.
Yes.
You're not going to be able to do that when they play the 49ers coming out of the bye. And if the 49ers go and score 10 points on their first 2 drives or 14 points on their first 2 drives and you had a slow start offensively, you're not running James Conner 25 times. So there's going to be, and that's why I think that these last 4 games are so interesting to me. You're going to play the 49ers at home. You're going to go to Chicago in the weather. Not a great team, but it's Christmas Eve on the road in Chicago. Then
that weather sounds really nice to me. I'm actually looking forward to it.
Sorry, Paul. And then speaking.
Sorry, Dani.
Oh, that's right.
It's gallows humor. It's gallows humor by
that.
Dani.
I forgot about that.
Yep.
And then we go to Philadelphia the next week, which is going to be another, I'm sure, lovely afternoon.
By the way, Red Sea, if you saw the video of Eagles fans pelting those two Niner fans with snowballs, proceed cautiously. Okay, if you're going to wear a Cardinals jersey into the Eagles Stadium, be real careful.
Yeah,
that's one setting where it's no joke.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I forgot that you get to do that exciting sideline.
I am actually excited. I'm just going to dress really warm.
But you know what? Can I say this about the defense
Make
too?
sure you have clean socks. Paul struggled with his socks on the way home.
Well, you didn't bring extra socks, did you? Were you wearing wet socks for like 4.5 hours, Paul?
Close to about 7 hours.
That's a really rookie mistake,
no,
Paul. That's really disappointing.
No, at one point I did go into the back of the plane and I was able to retrieve some clean socks, some dry socks, and let that. So Wolf might embellish how much I was whining about it, although that was definitely a factor.
I might have heard something out of Paul's own mouth.
It might have been. While Wolf's up there having his coffee and his Danish, and he's in there. So look. As for the defense, let me just say this. And I asked Gannon this after the game, and I got one of those James Conner answers where he sort of laughed, and that was more telling than the answer itself.
The old Anquan Bolden answers.
Yes. And I just said, how many different looks did you show the Steelers today? Because in talking to some guys after the game, I asked that same question, like, oh, we had a lot more. That's all they would say. We had a lot more. Like, we showed them a ton, and we had a lot more. Because keep in mind, Kenny Pickett is a second-year quarterback. He's got a year and a half in the league. So they went in, and they had a ton of different looks. They also made a small adjustment, to my eye. On third and obvious passing situations, Josh Woods came out of the game. Because he got victimized against the Rams more than once by Kyron Williams in coverage, Tyler Higbee in coverage, and they threw Owen Pappoe out there, a guy with really good speed. He's raw as a rookie, great athleticism, and they threw him out there in those third and obvious. So you see a Cardinals defensive coaching staff that I thought outcoached Tomlin. I thought really it was this scheme was better and more confounding to the Steelers than it was the other way around. And how often do you ever say that about a Mike Tomlin coach team? So that makes me bullish on the future as well. I
also noticed, Darren and I were talking during the game, that you could see when they put Trubisky in that the defense was moving around a lot more at the line of scrimmage. There was I don't remember if Pittsburgh, it was a delay game or they ended up calling a timeout pretty late, but you could tell that they did not know what they were seeing in the Cardinals defense. We also noticed that Woods would move outside quite a bit. If you would put, Chris Barnes more in that middle linebacker role, they were using Woods off the edge a little bit more this week.
Is that on opponents at this point that they can't figure out the 11-card pickup, as we've turned it, the 11-card pickup where guys are just meandering in the box and who goes where, and maybe you have one traditional defensive lineman, but it's a lot of linebackers and safeties. I mean, you would think teams would have an answer to that by now. Cardinals have put that on film a lot.
Well, for me, when you say that, I get a couple of reactions. One, probably the bigger one is, again, you're playing an opponent that you see once every 4 years. And I know it's a new team anyways, but it's like you get 1 week to kind of prep for this, and maybe it's just not enough. And two, it was Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett and a new offensive coordinator. Yep. I mean, we'll see what Brock Purdy, MVP candidate, and that offense is seeing when they
Pittsburgh also just signed Trace McSorley, so you never know.
There you go.
Wow, I did not see that. By the way, speaking of coaching, did you catch what Jonathan Gannon said on Monday after the Pittsburgh Steelers win, when he was asked about, I believe it was the difference in third downs, starting 0-4, ending up 10-17. One of those was a Kyler kneel down, so you're really 10-16 on third down. And as part of his answer, he said, I talked with Drew about it today. You can't be afraid to repeat plays when they're good. Interesting, right? You're a first-time offensive coordinator. You're a first-time play caller. I'm guessing, you're prone to, hey, I got a million different plays. Let's keep them off balance. But guess what? If you keep hitting with a single play, go back to it till they stop it. Just like Kyler was doing with Trey McBride, right? They can't cover him. Here we go. Again. McBride on a linebacker. Mismatch. Again. McBride on a slower box safety. Again. And I thought that was a really underrated part of the game plan, and what they did is like, for example, how many times did the Rams in those 2 games this year run the stinking crack toss? They kept going with the crack toss until the Cardinals stopped it, which they didn't. I mean, we put that on the radar. Cardinals got to figure that out in the offseason, the Rams crack toss, because they're going to see it in the first meeting next year.
Yeah.
As long as Sean McVay doesn't go to the Monday Night Football booth or whatever. So there was that. And then there was Kyler in the postgame in Pittsburgh where, to your point earlier, just to get a little more specific on what you already brought up, Darren, where he said, it was Gannon who verified what Kyler said on Sunday, that his feet are so good that sometimes he gets sped up a little too much. And that Kyler told him after the second or third series, okay, I feel settled in now. He wasn't as quick to go through his reads. And maybe his reads and his progressions were ahead of the receivers. He was so amped up. And, you're trying to get that rhythm, whatever that means. But part of rhythm is when you get into the base of your drop, you hitch and you want the ball out in rhythm with a receiver coming out of his break. And they didn't quite have that in sync yet. And it looked like, even though we had 2 receptions to receivers, I get it, there were definitely a couple other big shots that could have been. Rondale Moore,
sure.
Beautiful ball, 40 yards it could have been. And then, obviously, the touchdown toss that got wiped out by the holding.
Well, yeah, if things would have been a little bit different, Rondale Moore might have been one of the stars of the game, unfortunately. No doubt. And I know going back to our Patrick Peterson conversation that there's a lot of fans that were disappointed that the other one the touchdown catch got called back. And that was an unbelievable trapping against the helmet catch and everything. And I'm sure Rondale would probably say that I should have had that first one. I don't know if it wouldn't have been a touchdown the more I look at it, but he would have been down inside the 10-yard line on a fantastic throw by Kyler. And that's what I mean when I said earlier that Kyler's game wasn't reflected by those stats, because, I mean, there's 100 yards of passes right there and at least one score that he didn't get because of whatever happened. And he was throwing the ball much better, again, once he settled down, like you said, than he had been.
I wonder if Kyler, if he would have completed those, especially against Pat P, would have said after the game, I wonder if he would have channeled his inner Brock Purdy and said, and by the way, that was against Patrick Peterson. Remember when Brock Purdy did that earlier this year?
Yes.
They asked him about a touchdown pass, and Purdy actually offered up to the media.
Was that last year or this year?
I think it was earlier this year.
Right, I think it was because the picture of Purdy when he was really young, that picture he took with Patrick Peterson was circulating before that game.
Yeah, but Pat P had a couple of comments before that game about what they were going to do to Brock Purdy and the Niners receivers, and so Purdy was quick to point out who that touchdown toss came against. So that was highly entertaining, I thought. By the way, Dani, your first trip to Pittsburgh, were you amazed at how they put fries into everything? I mean, literally everything. They put them into the sandwiches. They put them into salads. There's fries on pizza, tater tot pizza. Did you experience any of that?
I respect it. No, I didn't. Like I had Permanente Brothers before, so we didn't hit that spot. And actually, the week prior here at our facility, I think we had talked about it. They made a Pittsburgh salad where they had fries in the salad, which I tried.
Yes.
Better than I was expecting. You know what? This was my first time ever going to Pittsburgh, and for some reason, I had low expectations, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed the city. It's a little too gloomy for my liking, but that's any Midwest city at this time of the year, so I understand. But the weekend that we had, at least the group of us that were kind of doing a bunch of stuff, I mean, I felt like we had been there for 4 days by the time it was kickoff on Sunday. I mean, like, I told Darren I needed a nap before the game started from the adventures that we had. But I actually really enjoyed Pittsburgh. It was a good time.
Did you go by that old Christmas Bazaar Market Square
area?
We
did.
Yeah.
We were actually going to try to ice skate around the tree, but the line was too long, which is actually probably for the better for me because I'm not good on skates, and so I would have had, there's a good chance I probably would have had like my wrist in a cast or a black eye or concussion or something come game time.
And you never know with those Pittsburghers, and the Penguins fans, they've been out there throwing hip checks out on the ice rink, even though it's Christmas time. So, yeah, it is. It's a cool town the way they, but
being downtown was really cool.
When it didn't rain on Saturday, I knew we were so hosed for Sunday. That the rain
you were so hosed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Danny and I were in the press box. We were good.
That's true.
Yeah, sorry, Paul.
Oh, boy. So, all right, what else am I missing here?
Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Jonathan Ledbetter.
Fantastic press conference to the media Tuesday.
And he was amazing in the video they put out when he was called. Michael Bidwell announced him as the winner, and he came out of the seats in the team meeting and just impromptu gave a speech. Really well done.
For those who don't know, every team has a nominee based on their efforts in the community, and each nominee will wear a decal on their helmet the rest of the year and gets a sizable donation towards a charity of their choice. And then Super Bowl weekend, the Walter Payton Man of the Year is announced. Ledbetter, I feel like it doesn't just say a lot about the type of person he is and the work he does in the community, because he truly, no exaggeration, is at almost every single community event that this organization puts on. He touched on it a little too. It kind of encompasses the year he's had, maybe of that underdog, somebody who's more in the shadows and isn't a position player where he has those big stats or numbers, isn't necessarily a household name, and that he's been okay with that role. And this year, his role includes stepping up as a leader in a position room that has been bit by the injury bug, to say the very least, and has performed well on the field and has stepped up as a leader in the community as well. He showed up to his press conference in a suit. He made sure that people got pictures of him at the end where he looked good, because he wanted to send them to his mom, who was the person he was most excited to call and tell about the award anyway. It was just, he was so well-spoken and intentional about the way he talked about his efforts in the community and what has led him in his life to being so passionate about who he is as a person and what this award means to him, Darren. I was almost in awe sitting there of like the 20 minutes just flew by because he was so great up there at the podium.
I'm a big Jonathan Ledbetter fan. I have been for a while. We talked in training camp about how he was kind of an old soul. He's only 26, but he carries himself a lot older than that, and I mean that in a good way in terms of just how he does things. And I do think he's turned into a very solid player. He's turned into a big leader in that locker room, and he definitely comes across to me as the type of player that Monty Ossenfort would want on this roster. So I would expect him to be around. He's not obviously super expensive, but he's been playing some solid football, and this defensive line, the names they've had all year, and then you add in the injuries, they should not be as effective as they are. And they are. Kevin Strong has been more effective than expected. Roy Lopez, you can go down the list, and it's really kind of amazing.
Yeah, Roy, I was talking to Roy Lopez last week, and he just said this scheme is such a better fit for what he does than when he was in Houston. So I don't know if that was just sort of a lucky strike of a signing, but I mean, Roy Lopez has averaged like 5 tackles a game as an interior D lineman. We've called his name a lot. And then Kevin Strong, obviously, we saw what the Cardinals' run defense looked like without Kevin Strong against the Rams. And then he was part of the big stuff at the goal line that was the turning point of the game. I mean, honestly, almost every game we go into, right, the Cardinals go into, you look at the opposing D line room, they have all these big names, guys you've heard of. Most people have never heard of anybody in the Cardinals D-line room, but they've been balling. I mean, in a lot of ways. I'm really curious to see how they address that in the offseason, because a lot of these guys were acquired as free agents, but they're still in their mid-20s.
Yeah, I am fascinated. I mean, we're not even talking. Lecky Fotu's on IR. LJ Collier's on IR. Carlos Watkins is on IR. Yeah. Those 3 guys were all part of the main rotation until they went down. So I am fascinated by it. I do think that I could see them trying to get some kind of blue chip defensive lineman, but you don't need a lot of them. You just want one guy to kind of anchor it. Now, if you can hit on a draft pick like you did with Trey McBride, who has been unbelievable. I mean, we talked about James Conner earlier, and I know you talked about McBride on that one thing, but like the tight end thing is just, it's amazing to me. I was talking to Wolf on the plane, and Wolf's like, he was telling me he thinks if McBride keeps upgrading his blocking to go with what he's doing catching the ball, he goes, the Cardinals have George Kittle. That would be pretty amazing.
Kyle Vandenbosch this morning in a Red Sea report about Trey McBride posed the question, is there another young tight end you'd rather have on your roster? If you were starting a team today, which tight end would you take? Would you take a Kelsey or Kittle at the end of their career? Or would you take a Trey McBride? I said, well, Lions fans would probably throw out Sam Laporta. I mean, Hawkinson, Mark Andrews is still in his prime, gets banged up a lot. But, point made by Kyle Vandenbosch. And isn't it from weeks 8 through 13 now? Trey McBride has the most receptions of any tight end in the NFL, and he's number 2 in receiving yards.
I saw a stat that if you extrapolate what he's done over a 17-game season since Kyler came back, it's like 116 catches and 1,300 yards for a 17-game season.
We had talked about when Zach Ertz was still on IR, if Ertz were to come back, had McBride earned that starting role. The Cardinals released Ertz last week, and McBride stepped up as he's continued to do the last couple of weeks and showing that he can be a true number 1 tight end. And you can tell that Kyler is really beginning to trust and rely on McBride. I think you saw that when Kyler went back to McBride after that first touchdown was negated and went back to him again. And we've seen that, and it's been impressive. Paul, you talk about this all the time, that one of McBride's best traits is he does not go down on first contact. It is hard to get him down. It's similar to a James Conner. And McBride has really become a staple of this offense, especially when you've got a wide receivers room that hasn't been able to really put up the numbers you would need them to.
Right now, Trey McBride, the very next catch he makes, which I assume will be against the 49ers, will set the franchise record for catches in a season. And that will be with 3+ games to go. And he wasn't even a main target. He was targeted 10 times in the first 5 games. So he barely got targeted those first 5 weeks, and he still piled up those numbers. He's already at 610 yards. Not a gigantic amount, but 610 yards isn't bad when you were only targeted 10 times in 5 weeks. And oh, by the way, he's the first Arizona Cardinal to surpass 600 yards receiving.
Wow.
As a tight end.
Yeah.
As a tight end.
Yeah.
And if he can somehow get to 800 yards, he needs 190 yards over these last 4 games, possible. He would be only the second tight end in franchise history to get 800 yards. Jackie Smith had 1,205 one year and 810 one year. And then you would have Trey McBride. And those 2 years were 66 and 67. So it's been a minute since the Cardinals have had much production from a tight end. And now all of a sudden they look like they might have some guy who you could really count on for the next 5, 6, 7 years.
I know we talk a lot about the rookie class. There's also been a lot of players from the previous regime in year 2, maybe year 3, that we have really seen step up either in a similar role or somebody like Zaven Collins make a position change and still be effective. And as much props as we've given to this front office and the coaching staff for the development of the rookies, I think it also says a lot that a player like Trey McBride, who didn't get a lot of opportunities last year and wasn't able to be nearly as effective as he has been this year, that's still impressive as well, even though they're not rookies.
Let me say 2 things about Trey McBride. One, we had him on the Big Red Rage last month, and we asked him about his mindset, the mentality. He doesn't go down, and he said he had a college coach early in his college career tell him, you should never go down on first contact. A dude with your athleticism and size in that lower half, like you shouldn't, don't let a safety or a DB bring you down especially. So that's where he said that stems from. But can I also say this? If you go back and you track his production, his surge this year, doesn't it more sync up with Zach Ertz going on IR? Because if you go back to week 6 is when he first started making imprint, 4 for 62 in the loss against the Rams, 26-9. He was quiet in week 7. Then week 8 against Baltimore, Josh Dobbs was still in that game, was still starting that game, obviously. He had 10 for 95 and that 17-yard touchdown where everyone shoved him in. And that's where it really started, to me, at least in my mind, is when Zach Ertz was out. Sort of lifted, he was out of Zach Ertz's shadow. And he was featured more in terms of the targets. And maybe he was used more as a receiving tight end than he had been previously. He was flexed out more. To me, that's where it sort of syncs up. And I just wonder if maybe his confidence grew once he wasn't around a 3-time Pro Bowl tight end who maybe, took most of the spotlight in that position room. Now all of a sudden he had the room to grow because Ertz was no longer in the picture. That's just at least my thinking on that. So then when it came to the point where maybe he was ready to come off IR, Zach Ertz, they said, you know what? Yeah, the feeling's mutual. You're looking for a contender, and we've got tight end 1. So let's go ahead and grant you your wish, and you go find another team.
It's interesting that as we sit here and record this on Tuesday of the bye week, Ertz still hasn't found a team yet when everybody thought that would probably happen by now.
So, all right. What else? Anything? Any big plans that I can live vicariously through when it comes to the bye weekend?
I'm going home to Dallas for a few days. I realize I haven't really been home since May, so it's been a hot minute. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Are you going to be saddled with dog sitting? Isn't that what happened last time you went home? You ended up dog sitting for various family members. Do I remember that right?
No, that's a good memory, Paul. I'm gonna have to throw her under the bus. My parents were going out of town for a wedding, and my older sister still, like, my nephew was too young, and my younger sister had too many plans over the weekend to drive back and forth from where she lives out to where my parents' house is. So I did fly home at one point to watch my dogs, which I would do anytime they needed. I love my dogs. I'm very looking forward to seeing them tonight. Good memory, Paul.
Tonight, you're not wasting any time getting out of town.
I'm leaving after work.
Wow.
And then lots of family time. My dad's actually going to come out back with me and spend the week with me. And then that following weekend, the rest of my family is going to join him and come out here for the 49ers game. I'm hoping my nephew will wear his Kyler jersey, because ever since he wore it for picture day, he gets very confused wearing it because it's not picture day anymore. And it used to be his Bird Gang jersey. And I got a text from my sister this morning actually saying that he's now calling it his Kyler jersey. So he's picking up on things, which is good news.
Okay. I'm going over to MC this golf tournament, Cardinals alum golf tournament. A few years ago, they took away my golf clubs and they gave me the PA mic. So I'm still trying to recover from that. But, when you go by the moniker Paulie 3-putt, that's what happens. So, okay, we'll go over there. I'll try not to get bear hugged by Michael Bankston. And, we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll rip off a few jokes, Jay Feely's expense, and make a quick exit. I don't know. We'll see how it goes this year.
Darren, are you taking any time off for the bye week? Please say yes.
Yes, I'm taking some time off for the bye week.
So he can coach some more basketball. That's what that's his downtime. He gets his mental health coaching basketball.
Not coaching, watching my sons coach basketball.
I see. Okay. All right. You got to coach up the coaches.
And there you go.
There you go. And that'll do it for this edition of Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation.